Goes like this. Honor marriage and guard the sacredness of sexual intimacy between wife and husband. God draws a firm line against casual and illicit sex. That's one. And then there is one in Hebrews. Hebrews I have already said. There is one in Ephesians 5:3-4. And it goes like this. Don't allow love to turn into lust, setting off a downhill slide into sexual promiscuity, filthy practices, or bullying greed. Though some tongues just love the taste of gossip, those who follow Jesus have better uses for language than that. Don't talk dirty or silly. That kind of talk doesn't fit our style. Thanksgiving is our dialect. You know the guidelines we laid out for you from the Master Jesus. God wants you to live a pure life. Keep yourselves from sexual promiscuity. Learn to appreciate and give dignity to your body, not abusing it, as is so common among those who know nothing of God. This is from 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5. 1 Corinthians 6:14-20. God honored the Master's body by raising it from the grave. He'll treat yours with the same resurrection power. Until that time, remember that your bodies are created with the same dignity as the Master's body. You wouldn't take the Master's body off to a whorehouse, would you? I should hope not. There's more to sex than mere skin on skin. Sex is as much spiritual mystery as physical fact. As written in Scripture, the two become one. Since we want to become spiritually one with the Master, we must not pursue the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more lonely than ever. The kind of sex that can never become one. There is a sense in which sexual sins are different from all others. In sexual sin, we violate the sacredness of our own bodies, those bodies that were made for God-given and God-modeled love, for becoming one with another. Or didn't you realize that your body is a sacred place, the place of the Holy Spirit? Don't you see that you can't live wherever you please, squandering what God paid such a high price for? The physical part of you is not some piece of property belonging to the spiritual part of you. God owns the whole works. So let people see God in and through your body. Now, getting down to the questions you asked in your letter to me. First, is it a good thing to have sexual relations? Certainly, but only within a certain context. It's good for a man to have a wife and for a woman to have a husband. Sexual drives are strong, but marriage is strong enough to contain them and provide for a balanced and fulfilling sexual life in a world of sexual disorder. The marriage bed must be a place of mutuality, the husband seeking to satisfy his wife, the wife seeking to satisfy her husband. Marriage is not a place to stand up for your rights. Marriage is a decision to serve the other, whether in bed or out. Abstaining from sex is permissible for a period of time if you both agree to it and if it's for the purposes of prayer and fasting, but only for such times. Then come back together again. Satan has an ingenious way of tempting us when we least expect it. I'm not, understand, commanding these periods of abstinence, only providing my best counsel if you should choose them. Sometimes I wish everyone were single like me, a simpler life in many ways. But celibacy is not for everyone any more than marriage is. God gives the gift of the single life to some, the gift of the married life to others. I do, though, tell the unmarried and widows that singleness might well be the best thing for them, as it has been for me. But if they can't manage their desires and emotions, they should by all means go ahead and get married. The difficulties of marriage are preferable by far to a sexually tortured life as a single. And if you are married, stay married. This is the master's command, not mine. If a wife should leave her husband, she must either remain single or else come back and make things right with him. And a husband has no right to get rid of his wife. For the rest of you who are in mixed marriages, Christian married to non-Christian, we have no explicit command from the master, so this is what you must do. If you are a man with a wife who is not a believer, but who will still wants to live with you, hold on to her. If you are a woman with a husband who is not a believer, but he wants to live with you, hold on to him. The unbelieving husband shares to an extent in the holiness of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is likewise touched by the holiness of her husband. Otherwise, your children will be left out, as it is. They also are included in the spiritual purposes of God. On the other hand, if the unbelieving spouse walks out, you've got to let him or her go. You don't have to hold on desperately. God has called us to make the best of it as peacefully as we can. You never know, wife. The way you handle this might bring your husband not only back to you, but to God. You never know, husband. The way you handle this might bring your wife not only back to you, but God. And don't be wishing you were someplace else or with someone else. Where you are right now is God's place for you. Live and obey and love and believe right there. God, not your marital status, defines your life. Don't think I'm being harder on you than on the others. I give this same counsel in all the churches. Stay where you were. This is 1 Corinthians 7:20-22. Stay where you were when God called your name. Were you a slave? Slavery is no roadblock to obeying and believing. I don't mean you're stuck and can't leave. If you have a chance at freedom, go ahead and take it. I'm simply trying to point out that under your new master, you're going to experience a marvelous freedom you would never have dreamed of. On the other hand, if you were free when Christ called you, you'll experience a delightful enslavement of God you would never have dreamed of. All of you, slave and free both, were once held hostage in a sinful society. Then a huge sum was paid out for your ransom. So please don't, out of old habit, slip back into being or doing what everyone else tells you. Friends, stay where you were called to be. God is there. Hold the high ground with Him at your side. Okay. 1 Corinthians 10:13. No test or temptation that comes your way is beyond the curse of what others have had to face. All you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. So, my very dear friends, when you see people reducing God to something they can use or control, get out of their company as fast as you can. Now, I will argue about this. No one abuses his own body. Does he? No, he feeds and pampers it. That's how Christ treats us, the church, since we are part of his body. This is why a man leaves father and mother and cherishes his wife. No longer two, they become one flesh. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. What is clearest to me is the way Christ treats the church, and this provides a good picture of how each husband is to treat his wife, loving himself in loving her, and how each wife is to honor her husband. Proverbs 5:18. Bless your fresh flowing fountain. Enjoy the wife you married as a young man. Lovely as an angel, beautiful as a rose. Don't ever quit taking delight in her body. Never take her love for granted. Why would you trade enjoying intimacies for cheap thrills with a prostitute, for dalliance with a promiscuous stranger? Mark well that God doesn't miss a move you make. He's aware of every step you take. The shadow of your sin will overtake you. You will find yourself stumbling all over yourself in the dark. Death is the reward of an undisciplined life. Your foolish decisions trap you in a dead end. Proverbs 6:20. Warning on adultery. Good friend, follow your father's good advice. Don't wander off from your mother's teachings. Wrap yourself in them from hand to foot. Wear them like a scarf around your neck. Wherever you walk, they'll guide you, etc. Moral discipline is a life path. They'll protect you from promiscuous women, from the seductive talk of some temptress. Don't lustfully fantasize on her beauty, nor be taken in by her bedroom eyes. You can buy an hour with a prostitute for a loaf of bread, but a promiscuous woman may well eat you alive. Can you build a fire in your lap and not burn your pants? Can you walk barefoot on hot coals and not get blisters? It's the same when you have sex with your neighbor's wife. Touch her and you'll pay for it. No excuses. Hunger is no excuse for a thief to steal. When he's caught, he has to pay back, even if he has to put his whole house in hock. Adultery is a brainless act, soul-destroying, self-destructive. Expect a bloody nose, a black eye, and a reputation ruined for good. For jealousy detonates rage in a cheated husband. Wild for revenge, he won't make allowance. Nothing you say or pay will make it all right. Neither bribes nor reason will satisfy him. Talk to wisdom as to a sister. Treat insight as your companion. They will be with you to fend off the temptress, that smooth-talking, honey-tongued seductress. As I stood at the window of my house, looking out through the shutters, watching the mindless crowd roll by, I spotted a young man without any sense arriving at the corner of the street where she lived, then turning up the path to her house. It was dusk, the evening coming on, the darkness thickening into night. Just then a woman met him. She'd been lying in wait for him, dressed to seduce him. Brazen and brushed she was, restlessly roaming, never at home, walking the streets, loitering in the mall, hanging out at every corner in town. She threw her arms around him and kissed him, boldly took his arm and said, "I've got all the makings for a feast. Today I made my offerings, my vows are all paid. So now I've come to find you, hoping to catch sight of your face, and here you are. I've spread fresh, clean sheets on my bed, colorful, imported linens. My bed is aromatic, with spices and exotic fragrances. Come, let's make love all night, spend the night in ecstatic lovemaking. My husband's not home, he's away on business, and he won't be back for a month." Soon she has him eating out of her hand, bewitched by her honeyed speech. Before you know it, he's trotting behind her like a calf led to the butcher shop, like a stag lured into ambush, and then shot with an arrow, like a bird flying into a net, not knowing what that it is flying, that its flying life is over. So friends, listen to me. Take these words of mine most seriously. Don't fool around with a woman like that. Don't even stroll through her neighborhood. Countless victims come under her spell. She's the death of many a poor man. She runs a halfway house to hell, fits you out with a straw and a coffin. Do you hear Lady Wisdom calling? Can you hear Madame Insight raising her voice? She's taken her stand at First and Main at the busiest intersection. Okay, I will add something to this as well. I promised to talk about one of the last quotes that I read out loud, and it talked a little bit about control. Often we use sexual intimacy as a way to kind of submit ourselves to something. Quite literally, a woman's body literally has to physically and biologically submit to her partner in order to, make it happen, which is why it's impossible to engage in the act unless the woman can submit. But one thing about submission is a man also gets to submit to something greater than himself, such as, this can be so many things, especially in our compartmentalized man-made society, like a gym membership, going to the church, attending school, having a job, having a passion, something that he is dedicated towards, as any woman can be dedicated or devoted to her children or raising her children, for example. So submission is always involved in an intimate relationship for both parties, but because submission is the only type of thing that can make us feel out of control while also, being in containment, in communion and inside a union, involved instead of ostracized, completely being taken and loved. Often we tend to confuse the feeling of being in love with love itself. Love is taking something as a part of yourself with respect. So the more you can respect yourself, the more you have the potential to love another without making them feel as though, they are idiots. But one thing that many people do not understand about boundaries and love and respect in general within a loving relationship is that because love can feel so good because it is out of our control, we must realize that because we, built a society for ourselves as humans, especially men, for themselves as men, they have to be really cautious around what they feel out of control regarding, because nature is no longer directly attached to us as a species. We are no longer part of the food chain, and so many of the things that we used to feel out of control around are gone because we create, we grow our own food essentially, and we rely on each other more than we rely on nature in general. Especially we rely on our mental capacity and cognitive security more than ever before, and more than we rely on our physical ability to submit or stay strong or do strong heavy lifting type of things. So we have changed, but our bodies are still kind of built the same way, especially for women. A woman will, I don't think, ever be able to stop to submit to a man without her body also submitting to him, which is why a woman will never be able to detach herself from physical intimacy, no matter her age, no matter her orientation, no matter her upbringing and things like that. So it is very important not to idolize and romanticize the notion of being in love, because that speaks of no boundaries. Why? Because boundaries, once you have them, you realize that you cannot lie to yourself either. You cannot lie to other people, but most importantly, you protect yourself by keeping what is bad out and letting what is good in. That is what boundaries are for. And so, sure, God may know what's best for you, but sometimes because we live in a society that is kind of void, or short of God in a lot of ways, and we have an immense influence over each other because we are so close to each other physically. God can always show us, where we should pour our energies. And if we pour our energy into something that we romanticize or idolize as something that we think is love, which it actually isn't, for example, lust, or butterflies in the stomach, things like that, we can actually suffer from a lack of boundaries. And Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, if I remember correctly, it's Henry Cloud who wrote a book on boundaries for people who are just starting out dating. I think this should be compulsory read in schools, and I don't understand why I was kind of forced to read books on history instead of, relationships. But if you want to start out with a successful relationship in life, that is the number one book I recommend. It's actually a series of books on boundaries. So Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend created it. And one of the books is actually a dating guide without all the fluff and, puff around how to get the person without actually putting anything on the table, or, how to pretend you're someone you're not. No, this book is about internal security before you go into a relationship. So it will actually protect you and your karma from going astray and terribly awry, right? It sometimes we, I'm sure I'm not alone when I say my mother has been a cheater. But my father is the typical Christian guy, the typical Christian evangelist who, says he respects women, but then when it comes down to it, his words literally, disrespect me as a daughter. And when I say that, I mean, like, he's just not very aware of his critical comments, but at the same time, neither of my parents are perfect. So basically, I'm not sure about why specifically my mom became a cheater in the first place, but I do know that her body was never cherished enough for her to remain in the marriage alone, which is, I think, a lot to do with the fact that she has been a Catholic all her life, but my father, even though he had been Catholic as well, they both together they chose to abandon that specific branch of Christianity. And this had been good for my father, I think, or at least it didn't, really destroy him. But abandoning Catholicism is quite risky, in my opinion, once you have been raised Catholic, because of the fact that the temple and the church are highly respected in Catholicism. And in evangelism, the point is not really to kind of exist regardless of the church, but to kind of, size it down or humble it physically, so it's not so, big and wide. And, I have gone to a Christian high school myself by choice, by the way, because I'm a third child and I had free will around that. But I didn't go to a Catholic one, so I know how kind of depressing it can be for a Protestant or an evangelist like me to kind of go back from a Catholic church to her church, because, of the darkness that is in the kind of the low-key type of church, if you know what I mean. And it's like I never realized how powerful church can actually be once it is in its original form. So to put it shortly, I'm pretty sure my mother just never had like any type of holiness and respectfulness around her own body from Catholicism, which is kind of sad because whenever I attend a Catholic church, I'm just taken over by the whole respectful spirit that is in the building, and how, like literally how freeing and gorgeous the whole place is. But I no longer blame my mother, even though I suffered immense emotional torture from it, and the whole family as well. I almost passed multiple times because of it. But what I'm trying to say is that to each their own. Often people say who are married, married people say that it's okay to cheat. We always forgive each other. Often it wears on the children, even though they never have the chance to express themselves. Often one party forgives, but the other is never able to get rid of of his or her shame around the fact. Often the church forgives, but the couple is not able to let it go, so it's like it can be really unique of a situation. And so I wouldn't always say that it's one way or another and it's really black or white like it was in the scripture. But again, this is just personal experience that I now know that the word is the word. So if it says that stranger's husband will be angry because you took his wife, it's probably true. But I just want to draw attention on the socioeconomic differences that we are facing today, as especially a younger generation, because women are no longer being married to as often, and men are no longer really being kept accountable around needing to get married in order to get with a woman, which both wears on women in general, but it mainly impacts families and the family unit. And provided that a man gets with a woman who is basically kind of have been forced to be a prostitute or her life because no one would marry her, because again, this society that we live in does not really advertise marriage anymore. So basically, it's not the woman's fault, and no one will get angry about the fact that that woman has been slept with 100 times before you. It is still true that God sees it all, and God sees everything, and that woman's body is still a temple, and your body is still a temple. And even if you are not being got angry at, you're not subject of anger directly, which you probably will never be anymore, because masculinity seems also to be under attack, unfortunately. It is true that what is written in the Bible in general can be really relieving, in that it shows the truth. It kind of points to the right direction because it comes from true human emotion and common sense, and it's not nonsense. Maybe you have been avoiding truth in your life because it has been so overwhelming in some ways or in others. I have been in this position, but that doesn't mean that you can always just avoid it, because there is a difference between avoidance and ignorance. You can ignore a woman, but you cannot avoid your own emotions and avoid a woman by getting with her and avoiding her past or her future or who she even is, if you cannot ignore her in the first place. Like, you have to really be very concerning about why you feel lustful about certain things and why not. And in order to become conscious of that, you need to become conscious of your own emotions. Because if you do not draw those lines, if you do not enforce your boundaries, if you do not assert your limits on time with other people, nobody will. If you do not believe in yourself, nobody will. If you do not respect yourself, mainly, nobody will in this world. I'm sorry. Not even women, because women are getting more and more messed up these days, especially in the world, which used to be, mainly led by kind of this blind type of religion that kind of people had no other option but to consume. And now that all people have access to media and they are like almost forced to consume it the same way that people were forced to be in a community and physically meet each other among church and religious scenarios and circumstance. People are becoming more and more aware of each other's situation and individually, instead of just being exposed to a lot of governmental influence. So, this comes with two consequences that you need to kind of take on as responsibility. One is, many people may be wrong. They go unchecked and uncensored, and they can hurt you easily just through words and without letting you physically assert yourself and shine as a person, expressing your love and your light. Or even if they're not being hurtful, there can be a missing piece of general guidance, which I believe is present in things like the Bible. But if you do not have a community, or as a man, if you have never been kept accountable, again, this kind of becomes harder to grasp. And it is no longer really true that a stranger man will become angry at you and scare you, because you can kind of almost just call the police on them, or call them crazy. So it's like war and battles have kind of become more nuanced. It's not so simple as it used to be anymore. When you cheat on someone else's partner, or when you cheat with someone else's partner, it's kind of like you cannot get away with it, but that doesn't mean that your consequences of your actions will not catch up with you in time. So it's like, even if you don't see the consequences now, that doesn't mean that they will never get to you. Like, I understand protection can be, the consequences of your actions get delayed enough that you never see them. But it's almost like, if you do so many wrong things in such a short period of time, how can you even track what lies you have made, what things you kind of failed to do? Because if it really accumulates and even you lose yourself in the process, then you will be kind of left there and think, why do I deserve this, when you actually deserve it? So it's not that we and like all victims deserve punishment. Quite the opposite, because we live in a society that favors punishment and reward system above all else. But sometimes we do deserve the consequences of our actions, and there can be a sense of control and empowerment in that, especially for women who commit sexual promiscuity for the first time, like when they kind of become promiscuous. But even that can be a trap, a snare. You enter that, and it will still give you nothing in the long run. Like, it will just deprive you, an illusion of control. And for men, it's worse, because it's the illusion of comfort. It's the illusion of being set up for life when you really have nothing for you, nothing on your name, nothing established for you. Nobody has a reason to respect you, but that doesn't mean that they don't have to, because basically your respect is not optional. It's just sometimes you have to earn it, but you cannot always. So I understand you have to pretend, but again, pretense is something that is unsustainable, in my opinion. And faith literally becomes the glue between promise and deliverance, and gratitude is the glue between present and future, and purpose is the glue between faith and gratitude, in my opinion. I'm just saying things from the top of my head, and I really hope it's helpful.